I have to stop you right there because what I'm about to show you is going to completely change how you think about those weeds in your garden. For the past 60 days I did something that every gardener tells you never to do. I stopped weeding. Completely. And what happened was absolutely wild. Now before you think I've lost my mind, hear me out, because this experiment taught me something that most gardening advice completely misses. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why those weeds might actually be trying to help your garden, not destroy it. So it started about 2 months ago. I was out in my garden, spending what felt like hours pulling weeds like I do every single week. My back was aching, my hands were dirty, and I just thought to myself, why am I fighting this battle that never ends? Like, I pull weeds on Monday and by Friday there's a whole new crop. It's exhausting. And it's not just the physical work, right? It's the mental exhaustion too. Every time you look at your garden, instead of enjoying it, you're scanning for weeds. You're stressed about them. You feel like you're failing as a gardener if there are weeds present. It becomes this constant source of anxiety rather than joy. I started thinking about all the time I'd spent over the years doing this same task. Hours and hours, week after week, year after year. And for what? The weeds always came back. No matter how thoroughly I weeded, no matter how much mulch I put down, they always returned. It felt like I was stuck in some kind of gardening nightmare that never ended. That's when I decided to try something different. What if I just stopped? What if I let nature do its thing for a while and actually observed what was happening instead of constantly fighting it? So I marked off a section of my garden, stopped all weeding, and just watched. I picked a spot that was about 10 by 10 feet, roughly the size of a typical raised bed. It had some vegetable plants from earlier in the season that were finishing up, and it was already starting to show signs of weed pressure. Perfect for an experiment. I put up some stakes around it so I'd remember not to touch it, and I started documenting everything with photos and notes. Week 1 was honestly really hard. Every time I walked past that section, my hands were itching to pull those weeds. They were growing fast, spreading out, and it looked messy. I'm not gonna lie, it looked bad. My neighbor even asked if everything was okay. She said, "Are you feeling all right? Your garden's looking a little rough over there." I just smiled and told her I was trying something new. But inside, I was doubting myself. What if this was a huge mistake? What if these weeds spread to the rest of my garden? What if I was creating a problem that would take years to fix? The gardening police in my head were screaming at me to just grab the hoe and clean it all up, but I stuck with it because I was genuinely curious about what would happen if I just let go of control for once. By week 2, something interesting started happening. The soil underneath those weeds stayed moist even though we hadn't had rain in days. Meanwhile, the areas where I kept weeding were bone dry and cracking. That was my first clue that something more was going on here. I started checking the soil moisture every morning with my finger, just pushing it down into the dirt to feel how deep the moisture went. Under the weeds I could feel dampness 3 or 4 inches down. In my pristine weed-free beds, the soil was dry after just an inch. That's a massive difference when you think about how much water that represents and how much money people spend on irrigation. Week 3 and 4, the weeds were really taking over. I had dandelions shooting up everywhere, some clover spreading across the ground, and these tall grassy weeds I couldn't even identify. It looked like I'd completely abandoned that section of the garden. But here's what I noticed. The soil temperature under the weeds was significantly cooler than the exposed soil. On a hot day, I measured a 15-degree difference. 15 degrees. That's huge. Those weeds were literally acting like a natural air conditioning system for my soil. I got my soil thermometer out on a particularly scorching afternoon when it was about 95 degrees outside. The bare soil in my maintained beds registered at 112 degrees at the surface. That's hot enough to kill beneficial microbes and cook plant roots, but under that canopy of weeds, the soil was only 97 degrees. Still warm, but not destructive. That protective cover was making a real difference. And it wasn't just the temperature. I started noticing that when we did finally get a rain shower, the water soaked into the weedy section much faster than my bare beds. In the bare areas, I could see water pooling on the surface, running off to the sides, not really penetrating deeply. But in the weedy section, the water just disappeared into the soil almost immediately. Those weed roots had created channels and pathways that allowed water to infiltrate quickly and deeply. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Around week 5, I started doing some research because I needed to understand what was actually happening. And what I learned blew my mind. I spent hours reading scientific papers. watching lectures from soil scientists, and talking to some farmers who practice regenerative agriculture, everything I thought I knew about weeds was basically wrong. Weeds aren't just random plants that show up to annoy us. They're actually nature's repair crew. When your soil is damaged, compacted, or missing certain nutrients, specific weeds show up to fix those exact problems. It's like your soil is calling for help, and these weeds are responding to that call. They're not there by accident, they're there because your soil needs them. Think about it like this: if you scrape your knee, your body sends specific cells to that injury to start healing it. You don't get mad at those cells for showing up. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Weeds are doing the same thing for damaged soil. They're the first responders in the ecosystem repair process. Different weeds tell you different things about your soil. If you've got lots of dandelions, your soil is probably compacted and needs better drainage. Clover means you're low on nitrogen. Chickweed shows up when your soil is actually pretty fertile but maybe too wet. These aren't invaders, they're indicators. I started looking at my weedy section with completely new eyes. Those dandelions I mentioned. I had tons of them, and sure enough, when I pushed a screwdriver into the soil to test compaction, it was really hard to penetrate more than a few inches in some spots. My soil was compacted, and the dandelions knew it before I did. The clover spreading everywhere was another message. I hadn't added any nitrogen to this bed in over a year. I'd grown tomatoes there the previous season, which are heavy feeders, and I never replenished what they took out. The clover was literally showing up to fix that nitrogen deficiency, because clover can pull nitrogen from the air and store it in nodules on its roots. It was fertilizing my soil for free. But here's the really cool part. These weeds aren't just showing up to tell you what's wrong, they're actively fixing it. Deep-rooted weeds like dandelions are breaking up that compacted soil, creating channels for air and water. Their roots go down sometimes 2 feet or more, mining minerals from deep in the earth and bringing them up to the surface. I actually pulled up one of the dandelions just to see how deep the root went. I had to dig down almost 18 inches to get the whole thing, and even then, it broke off. The hole it left behind was like a perfect little tunnel going straight down into the subsoil. Multiply that by dozens or hundreds of dandelions, and you've got a soil aeration system that would cost thousands of dollars if you had to hire someone to do it mechanically. When those weeds eventually die back, all those nutrients get deposited right into your topsoil, where your garden plants can use them. It's like they're doing free fertilization for you. They're literally recycling nutrients from deep underground and making them available at the surface. That dandelion root I pulled up, it'll break down and release calcium, potassium, and other minerals right where my vegetables can reach them. And remember how the soil stayed moist under the weeds? That's because their leaves are protecting the soil from direct sun and wind. Bare soil loses moisture incredibly fast, but covered soil holds onto it. Plus, all those roots are creating organic matter that helps the soil retain even more water. Every time a root dies and decomposes, it leaves behind little channels and adds carbon to the soil, which acts like a sponge. I did a simple test to prove this. I took 2 jars and filled them with soil from different areas, one from my bare, weeded bed and one from under the weeds. I added the same amount of water to each and let them sit for an hour. Then I tipped them to see how much water drained out. The bare soil released almost half the water. The weedy soil held onto most of it. That organic matter made all the difference in water retention capacity. By week 6 of my experiment, I was seeing things I never expected. Earthworms, lots of them, way more than in my weed-free sections. Turns out earthworms love the cooler, moister conditions under weed cover, and earthworms are basically the best thing you can have in your soil. They're aerating it, fertilizing it, and improving its structure naturally. I counted them one morning just out of curiosity. In a single shovel full of soil from my weedy section, I found 7 earthworms. 7! In the same amount of soil from my pristine beds, I found maybe 1, sometimes none. That's a dramatic difference. And earthworms are worth their weight in gold when it comes to soil health. Their castings are some of the best natural fertilizer you can get, packed with nutrients in a form that plants can easily absorb. I also noticed the soil itself was changing. It was darker, richer looking. It had this crumbly texture that good soil is supposed to have. The weedy section was developing what gardeners call tilth, that perfect soil structure that's loose enough to work but holds together well. When I squeezed a handful, it formed a ball but crumbled apart easily when I poked it. That's exactly what you want. Compare that to my traditionally managed beds where the soil was lighter in color, didn't hold together as well, and honestly felt kind of lifeless. There wasn't that richness, that depth of color that indicates lots of organic matter and biological activity. It was functional soil, sure, but it wasn't thriving soil. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, weeds have benefits, but they're still competing with my plants, right? They're stealing water and nutrients. And yes, that's absolutely true. This is where it gets nuanced, and this is important. Weeds are helpful when they're doing that soil repair work. They're beneficial when they're protecting bare soil, but when they start competing with your actual crops or garden plants, especially young seedlings, that's when they become a problem. It's all about balance and timing. In my experiment, the section I let go completely wild definitely would have been a problem if I'd been trying to grow vegetables there. The weeds would have outcompeted young transplants, no question. I watched my neighbor plant some pepper seedlings in a weedy area, and those poor things just sat there barely growing because they couldn't compete for resources. His peppers in clean beds took off, while those ones stayed tiny. But for rebuilding soil health, they were doing an amazing job. The key is understanding what you're trying to accomplish. If you're actively growing crops, you need to manage weeds so your plants can thrive. But if you've got bare soil sitting there between plantings, letting weeds grow might actually be the best thing you can do for it. So here's what I learned. The goal isn't to eliminate all weeds forever. That's an impossible battle anyway. The goal is to build such healthy, vibrant soil that your desired plants can outcompete the weeds naturally. When your soil ecosystem is thriving, your garden plants grow so vigorously that weeds just can't keep up. They grow faster, they're stronger, they shade out potential weeds, and they use resources more efficiently. That's nature's way of managing weeds, and it actually works better than our constant intervention ever could, and this is where things get really interesting. Around week 7, I started using something called fancy chicken in my garden beds. Now I wasn't sure what to expect, but I'd been researching ways to build better soil health, and this kept coming up. Fancy chicken is basically food for your soil microbes. And healthy soil microbes are the secret to everything I've been talking about. They break down organic matter, make nutrients available to plants, improve soil structure, and help your plants grow stronger and more resistant to stress. Here's the thing about soil microbes that most people don't realize. They're the foundation of the entire soil food web. Without them, nothing else works right. And when you have a really diverse, healthy population of microbes in your soil, your whole garden ecosystem starts functioning the way it's supposed to. I applied fancy chicken to half of my experimental section, and left the other half alone as a control. Within 2 weeks, the difference was noticeable. The section with fancy chicken, the soil just looked more alive. It had that rich, dark color, it smelled earthy in that good way, and the weeds there actually started growing less aggressively. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, but here's what's happening. When your soil microbes are really healthy and active, they create better soil structure and nutrient availability. This means your desired plants can access what they need more easily. They grow stronger and denser, which naturally suppresses weed growth just by taking up space and resources. It's not that the weeds disappear, it's that they become less dominant over time. Your garden plants start winning the competition naturally because they're getting exactly what they need from a healthy soil ecosystem. By week 8, I started selectively removing some of the larger weeds from my fancy chicken section, and planting some tomato starts. Normally when you plant in weedy areas, the transplants struggle. They're competing from day one and often just don't thrive. But these tomatoes took off. They established quickly, grew faster than my tomatoes in the weed-free but less biologically active sections, and honestly looked healthier overall. Darker green leaves, thicker stems, just more vigorous growth. That's the power of really healthy soil biology. Week 9 and 10, I kept observing both sections. The control section, where I just let weeds grow without any intervention, was still weedy, still had that improved soil structure from the weed roots, but it wasn't really progressing beyond that. It was just a maintained wild state. The fancy chicken section was different. It was evolving. The soil was getting better week by week. I could see more microbial activity, more earthworms, better water infiltration. It was like watching soil come alive in real time. What really convinced me was when I did a simple soil test. I dug down about 6 inches in 3 different areas. My traditional weed-free garden bed, my wild weedy section, and my fancy chicken section. The differences were striking. The traditional bed had okay soil, but it was a bit compacted below the surface and pretty dry. The wild section had great structure and good moisture but lacked that rich darkness that indicates high organic matter and microbial activity. The fancy chicken section had it all. Great structure, good moisture retention, and that dark, rich, alive quality. Now we're at day 60, and here's my conclusion. Weeds aren't the enemy. Poor soil is the enemy. When your soil is struggling, weeds show up to help repair it. They protect it, feed it, restructure it, and prepare it for other plants. That's literally their job in nature. But we don't have to just let our gardens go wild and hope for the best. We can work with nature by supporting the soil microbes that make everything else possible. That's what fancy chicken does. It feeds those microbes, helps them thrive, and when your soil biology is really healthy, your whole garden transforms. You're not constantly battling weeds because your desired plants are vigorous enough to hold their own. You're not constantly adding fertilizers because your soil microbes are cycling nutrients efficiently. Your plants are healthier, more productive, and more resilient to pests and disease because they're growing in truly living soil. After these 60 days, I'm changing my entire approach to gardening. I'm not trying to maintain bare, weed-free soil anymore. Instead, I'm either mulching heavily or growing cover crops to keep the soil protected and fed. I'm using fancy chicken regularly to maintain that healthy microbial population. And when weeds do pop up, I'm seeing them as information about what my soil needs, rather than just something to eliminate. I'll still weed around my vegetables and flowers, because competition is real. But I'm doing it with a different mindset. I'm working with my soil ecosystem, not against it. And the results speak for themselves. My plants are healthier, my soil is richer, and I'm spending way less time fighting battles I can't win. So if you're tired of the endless weeding cycle, if your plants never seem to thrive no matter what you do, if your soil is hard, dry, or just lifeless, maybe it's time to try a different approach. Feed your soil microbes. Protect your soil surface. Work with nature instead of against it. Trust me, after 60 days of watching this transformation happen, I'm never going back to the old way. My garden has never been healthier, and honestly, gardening has never been more enjoyable. Give your soil what it needs to thrive, and everything else starts falling into place naturally. I have to stop you right there, because what I'm about to show you is going to completely change how you think about those weeds in your garden. For the past 60 days, I did something that every gardener tells you never to do. I stopped weeding. Completely. And what happened was absolutely wild. Now before you think I've lost my mind, hear me out, because this experiment taught me something that most gardening advice completely misses. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why those weeds might actually be trying to help your garden, not destroy it. So it started about 2 months ago. I was out in my garden, spending what felt like hours pulling weeds like I do every single week. My back was aching, my hands were dirty, and I just thought to myself, why am I fighting this battle that never ends? Like, I pull weeds on Monday and by Friday there's a whole new crop. It's exhausting. And it's not just the physical work, right? It's the mental exhaustion too. Every time you look at your garden, instead of enjoying it, you're scanning for weeds. You're stressed about them. You feel like you're failing as a gardener if there are weeds present. It becomes this constant source of anxiety rather than joy. I started thinking about all the time I'd spent over the years doing this same task. Hours and hours, week after week, year after year. And for what? The weeds always came back. No matter how thoroughly I weeded, no matter how much mulch I put down, they always returned. It felt like I was stuck in some kind of gardening nightmare that never ended. That's when I decided to try something different. What if I just stopped? What if I let nature do its thing for a while and actually observed what was happening instead of constantly fighting it? So I marked off a section of my garden, stopped all weeding, and just watched. I picked a spot that was about 10 by 10 feet, roughly the size of a typical raised bed. It had some vegetable plants from earlier in the season that were finishing up, and it was already starting to show signs of weed pressure. Perfect for an experiment. I put up some stakes around it so I'd remember not to touch it, and I started documenting everything with photos and notes.